German Shepherd saves a baby abandoned by its mother on the train tracks. What happens next will leave you in tears. In the quaint town of Springfield, Illinois, where everyone knew each other by name and shared their daily lives with neighborly warmth, there lived a remarkable German Shepherd named Buddy. His presence was as familiar to the townspeople as the morning sun rising over the local diner, where he would often sit outside, greeting passers-by with intelligent eyes and a gentle demeanor that made him the unofficial mascot of their close-knit community. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from. Stay tuned. Buddy wasn't just any dog. He possessed an uncanny intelligence that set him apart. His owner had long since moved away, but the entire town had collectively adopted him, ensuring he was well fed and cared for. Local businesses kept water bowls outside their doors, and children would save bits of their lunches to share with him. He had become such an integral part of Springfield that no one questioned his freedom to roam the streets, knowing he was more than capable of taking care of himself. John Miller, the town's mechanic, had developed a particular fondness for Buddy. From his workshop near the railroad tracks, he would often observe the dog's methodical patrols of the area, noting how the animal seemed to take his self-appointed duties as the town's guardian seriously. There was something about Buddy's calculated movements and attentive gaze that suggested he understood far more than anyone might expect. On a seemingly ordinary autumn morning, when the air was crisp and leaves scattered across the sidewalks, something changed in Buddy's routine. Instead of his usual peaceful demeanor, he began barking incessantly near the railroad tracks. His normally composed behavior had transformed into an urgent, almost frantic display that caught the attention of a few passers-by, though most dismissed it as typical dog behavior. John, however, knew better. In all the years he'd known Buddy, he'd never seen him act this way. The dog's barks carried a different tone, one that spoke of urgency and desperation. As the hours passed and Buddy's agitation only grew, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The mechanical work on Mrs. Henderson's old Chevrolet would have to wait. There was something in Buddy's behavior that demanded attention. Following his instincts, John closed up his shop early and decided to investigate. As he approached Buddy, the dog's eyes locked with his, and without hesitation, the German Shepherd began leading him along the tracks. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the rails, and the autumn wind carried a chill that made John pull his jacket tighter around himself. What happened next would change the lives of everyone in Springfield forever. Near a stationary train, bundled in a modest blanket, lay a baby, whimpering softly. John's heart nearly stopped at the sight. The infant was small, vulnerable, and alone, save for the protective presence of Buddy, who had apparently been standing guard for hours. The blanket wrapped around the baby caught John's attention immediately. It was simple but carefully made, with 2 initials embroidered in the corner, EC. These letters would soon become the center of a mystery that would captivate not just Springfield, but the entire nation. As John carefully lifted the baby, checking for any signs of distress, Buddy remained close, his eyes never leaving the tiny bundle. The discovery sent ripples through the quiet town of Springfield. Within hours, the police were involved, and word spread quickly through the community. Rachel Simmons, an ambitious reporter from the regional news station, arrived in town like a whirlwind, sensing a story that could launch her career to new heights. Her presence would add another layer of complexity to an already intricate situation. As the sun set on that fateful day, no one in Springfield could have predicted how this discovery would unravel a tale of love, sacrifice, and redemption. The baby's presence would test the town's unity, challenge their prejudices, and ultimately reveal the true meaning of community. And at the center of it all was Buddy, the German Shepherd who seemed to understand more about human nature than anyone could have imagined. The police investigation began immediately, but the lack of evidence made the case particularly challenging. The only real clue they had was the embroidered initials on the blanket, EC, which seemed to lead nowhere. Every family in Springfield with matching initials was questioned, but no connections were found. It was as if the baby had appeared out of thin air, with only Buddy as a witness to the truth. Meanwhile, John found himself increasingly drawn into the situation. The baby, temporarily placed in the care of local social services, had left an indelible mark on his heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye, and Buddy's continued agitation near the railroad tracks suggested the same. The dog would return to the spot daily, searching for something, or someone, that remained hidden from view. As Rachel Simmons prepared her first news report about the hero dog of Springfield, she couldn't have known that her broadcast would reach far beyond the local audience she anticipated, touching the life of someone who had been running from their past for far too long. Rachel Simmons sat in her makeshift office at the local news station's temporary setup in Springfield, reviewing the footage of Buddy's heroic discovery. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped rhythmically on the desk as she crafted what she hoped would be her breakthrough story. The tale of a loyal German shepherd saving an abandoned baby was exactly the kind of heart-touching narrative that could catapult her from regional reporter to national correspondent. Hero dog saves abandoned baby in small-town miracle. The headline flashed across screens nationwide. Rachel's report was masterfully constructed, focusing on Buddy's unwavering vigil and John Miller's crucial role in following the dog's lead. The story struck a chord with viewers across the country, and within days, Springfield found itself at the center of national attention. Miles away, in a modest apartment in another state, Emily Carter's hands trembled as she watched the news coverage. The sight of the familiar blanket with her initials, EC, made her heart race. She recognized every stitch of that blanket. She had embroidered those initials herself during happier times. Her son Ethan, the baby she had left behind in a moment of desperate choice, was now the focus of national attention. Emily's story was one of survival and impossible choices. Years ago, she had fled Springfield to escape an abusive relationship, carrying with her only hope and determination. When she discovered she was expecting, her situation became even more complicated. Without resources or support, she had made the heart-wrenching decision to leave her baby where she believed he would be found quickly and cared for properly. The media circus surrounding the discovery grew with each passing day. News vans lined Springfield's main street, and reporters competed for exclusive angles on the story. Rachel Simmons positioned herself as the authority on the case, delivering daily updates that captivated audiences. She interviewed local residents, pediatric experts, and even animal behaviorists who attempted to explain Buddy's extraordinary actions. John Miller watched the media frenzy with growing concern. While the attention had initially seemed positive, he noticed how the story was beginning to shift. Speculation about the mother's identity and motives grew increasingly sensational, with some commentators painting harsh portraits of someone they knew nothing about. John, who spent his evenings visiting the baby at the local social services center, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than anyone realized. Buddy's behavior continued to intrigue John. The dog maintained his vigilant presence near the railroad tracks, especially during the quiet hours of early morning and late evening. One particular evening, as John followed Buddy on another of his mysterious patrols, they discovered something that would change the course of the investigation: a torn diary hidden beneath some bushes near the tracks. The diary's pages, though weathered and incomplete, told fragments of a young woman's struggle. While no names were mentioned, the emotional depth of the entries painted a picture of someone facing impossible choices. John carefully collected the pages, knowing they might hold crucial clues to understanding the full story. Meanwhile, Emily's anxiety grew with each passing day. The national coverage meant that her past was catching up with her faster than she had ever imagined possible. She knew she had to make a decision: continue hiding and lose any chance of reuniting with her son, or return to Springfield and face the consequences of her choices. The emotional toll of her decision weighed heavily on her. Every news report about the search for the baby's mother felt like a personal accusation. Yet, as she watched the footage of Buddy standing guard near the tracks, something stirred in her heart. The dog's unwavering loyalty reminded her of the strength she would need to face her past. As Emily contemplated her next move, Rachel Simmons was preparing her biggest story yet. She had received an anonymous tip about a young woman who had left Springfield under mysterious circumstances around the same time the baby might have been conceived. Rachel's investigative instincts told her she was close to breaking the case wide open, unaware that her pursuit of the truth would set in motion events that would challenge everyone's assumptions about right and wrong. Back in Springfield, John spent his evenings reading through the diary pages, piecing together a story of fear, love, and desperate choices. The more he read, the more he understood that the person who left the baby must have been facing circumstances none of them could fully comprehend. Buddy would sit beside him during these evening sessions, his intelligent eyes seeming to hold secrets that were yet to be revealed. The town's residents, initially united in their concern for the baby, began to show signs of division. Some demanded justice and consequences for the abandonment, while others advocated for understanding and compassion. The discussion boards beneath Rachel's online articles filled with heated debates about motherhood, responsibility, and forgiveness. Springfield, once known for its close-knit community spirit, found itself at the center of a national debate about morality and judgment. Emily Carter stood at the bus station just outside Springfield, her heart pounding with each step that brought her closer to her hometown. The familiar skyline hadn't changed much in the years since she'd left, but everything else felt different. The weight of her decision to return pressed heavily on her shoulders as she clutched her worn backpack, containing everything she owned in the world. The morning air was crisp, and the sound of distant trains brought back memories she'd tried so hard to suppress. She had watched every news report about Buddy and her son with growing anxiety, knowing that each passing day made her secret harder to keep. The media coverage had painted various pictures of the mother who had left her baby, some sympathetic, others harsh and judgmental, but none of them knew the real story, the truth that had haunted her every moment since that desperate night. As she walked through the familiar streets, Emily noticed how the town had transformed into a media circus. News vans were parked along Main Street, and reporters milled around with coffee cups in hand, hoping to catch the next big break in the story. She pulled her hood closer around her face, careful to avoid their cameras. The last thing she needed was to be recognized before she was ready to reveal herself. Her first stop was John Miller's auto shop. Through her careful monitoring of the news coverage, she had come to recognize him as someone who seemed to understand there was more to the story than met the eye. His compassionate interviews and careful words about the unknown mother had given her hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would listen to her side of the story. The mechanic's shop was quiet when she arrived, with only the gentle whirring of tools in the background. John was working under the hood of an old pickup truck, with Buddy lying nearby, watching his every move. The sight of the German Shepherd made Emily's throat tight. This was the animal who had saved her son, who had stood guard when she couldn't. As if sensing her presence, Buddy's head lifted, and his eyes locked with hers. There was something in his gaze that seemed to recognize her, though they had never met. The dog rose slowly, his tail giving a tentative wag as he approached her. John, noticing Buddy's movement, emerged from under the hood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice kind but cautious. The recent media attention had made everyone in town a bit wary of strangers. Emily took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. "My name is Emily Carter," she said softly, "and I believe you found something that belongs to me." The recognition in John's eyes was immediate. He glanced at the initials on his workbench calendar, EC, then back at her. The pieces were falling into place. Buddy had moved to stand beside her, his presence both protective and reassuring, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Inside the workshop's small office, Emily shared her story. She told John about fleeing from her abusive ex-boyfriend, about discovering her pregnancy while trying to rebuild her life, and about the impossible choice she had faced. As she spoke, tears rolled down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. She had rehearsed this conversation countless times in her head, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of finally speaking her truth. John listened intently, his expression thoughtful. The torn diary pages he had found suddenly made perfect sense. They were fragments of Emily's story, pieces of her heart left behind on that fateful night. As she spoke about her ex-boyfriend's controlling behavior and her fear for her safety, John began to understand the depth of courage it had taken for her to come back. "I never wanted to abandon him," Emily explained, her voice breaking. "I just wanted him to be safe, to have a chance at a better life than I could give him while I was running. I thought someone would find him quickly. I didn't know Buddy would be there." As if understanding he was being discussed, Buddy moved closer to Emily, resting his head on her knee. The gesture brought fresh tears to her eyes. This dog, this remarkable animal, had protected her son when she couldn't. The guilt and gratitude mixed in her heart, creating an emotional storm she could barely contain. What neither of them knew was that Rachel Simmons had spotted Emily entering the auto shop. The reporter's instincts had been triggered by the mysterious woman's arrival, and she had immediately begun making calls to her sources. Within hours, she would have Emily's identity confirmed, and the story she had been chasing would take on a whole new dimension. John, seeing the genuine pain and remorse in Emily's eyes, made a decision. He shared with her the diary pages he had found, watching as she recognized her own handwriting, her own desperate words written in moments of fear and uncertainty. The pages were like pieces of her soul scattered along those railroad tracks, now finally finding their way back to her. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the workshop windows, Emily and John began to formulate a plan. She would need legal help, support, and protection, especially once her identity became public. What they didn't realize was that time was running out faster than they imagined. Rachel Simmons was already preparing her breaking news story, and Emily's ex-boyfriend was about to discover exactly where she had been hiding all these years. The evening news broadcast crackled with anticipation as Rachel Simmons prepared for her biggest story yet. The studio lights felt particularly harsh that night, as she adjusted her blazer and checked her reflection one final time. She had worked tirelessly to piece together Emily's identity, and now she held what she believed was the story of her career in her perfectly manicured hands. "Breaking news in the Springfield baby case," Rachel's voice rang out across television screens throughout the region. "This reporter has exclusively uncovered the identity of the mother who abandoned her baby by the railroad tracks. Emily Carter, a former Springfield resident, has been identified as the mother of the infant found by local hero Buddy the German Shepherd." The effect was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, social media erupted with comments, shares, and heated discussions. The quiet life Emily had hoped to rebuild in Springfield shattered like glass under the weight of public scrutiny. Phone calls flooded the local police station, and reporters from national networks began booking flights to the small Illinois town. At John's auto shop, Emily watched the broadcast with growing horror. her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of his office desk. She had hoped to handle this revelation on her own terms, to explain her story in a way that people might understand. Now, that choice had been taken from her. Buddy, sensing her distress, pressed closer to her side, his steady presence offering what comfort he could. "I should have known this would happen," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the television's continued coverage. "I should have been faster, should have done this differently." John switched off the TV, his face set with determination. "You came back to make things right," he said firmly. "That's what matters. We'll figure this out." But the situation was spiraling beyond their control. Outside the auto shop, a crowd had begun to gather. Some held signs condemning Emily's actions, while others showed support with messages of understanding and compassion. The division in the community that had been simmering beneath the surface now boiled over into the streets of Springfield. Rachel's report had painted a sensational picture, focusing on Emily's sudden departure years ago and her recent return. The reporter had woven a narrative that raised more questions than it answered, leaving viewers to fill in the blanks with their own assumptions and prejudices. The story had everything: mystery, drama, and moral complexity that made for perfect television ratings. As the evening progressed, the town's social media pages filled with debates about motherhood, responsibility, and forgiveness. Longtime residents recalled Emily from years ago, sharing memories and speculations about her departure. Some remembered her as a quiet, kind young woman, while others claimed they had always sensed something was off about her. Inside the auto shop, Emily and John worked quickly to formulate a plan. They knew they needed legal representation, but more importantly, they needed to protect Ethan from the media circus that was building. The baby, still in the care of social services, had become the center of a story that was growing more complex by the hour. Sarah Thompson, the social worker assigned to Ethan's case, arrived at the auto shop through a back entrance, navigating past the growing crowd. She had seen enough cases to know that situations like these were rarely as simple as they appeared in news headlines. Her presence brought both relief and anxiety to Emily. This woman held significant influence over her future with Ethan. "I'm not here to judge," Sarah assured them, her experienced eyes taking in Emily's obvious distress. "I'm here to understand and to ensure that whatever happens next is in the best interest of the child." As they talked, Buddy remained vigilant, moving between the windows and doors of the shop, as if he understood the need to guard against the chaos building outside. His behavior hadn't changed since the day he found Ethan. He remained protective, alert, and somehow aware of the gravity of the situation. The conversation with Sarah was interrupted by an urgent knock at the back door. It was Linda Martinez, a local lawyer known for taking on challenging family cases. She had seen the news and came directly to offer her services, recognizing that Emily would need legal protection in the storm that was brewing. What Rachel Simmons did was irresponsible journalism, Linda stated firmly, spreading out papers on John's workbench. But now that it's done, we need to take control of the narrative. Emily, you need to tell your story, but we need to do it the right way. As they discussed strategies and options, none of them noticed the dark figure watching from across the street, taking in every detail of the scene unfolding at the auto shop. Emily's past was catching up faster than anyone could have anticipated, and the revelation of her identity was just the beginning of a chain of events that would test the entire community's capacity for understanding and forgiveness. The night grew longer as they worked to prepare for what would come next. Outside, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the tension in the air remained. Springfield had become ground zero for a national conversation about motherhood, judgment, and redemption. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a baby boy slept peacefully in a social services facility, unaware that his story was touching hearts and challenging assumptions across the country. The morning sun had barely risen over Springfield when a sleek black car with out-of-state plates rolled into town. Behind the wheel sat Marcus Bennett, his knuckles white against the steering wheel as he watched the local news coverage on his phone. Emily's face filled the screen, and his expression darkened with each passing moment. He had spent years searching for her, and now, thanks to an ambitious reporter's need for ratings, he knew exactly where to find her. At the Social Services Center, Emily sat beside Ethan's crib, watching her son sleep peacefully. These supervised visits were precious moments, carefully monitored by Sarah Thompson, who took detailed notes on their interactions. Buddy had somehow managed to become a regular visitor too, having charmed the entire staff with his gentle demeanor around the baby. The German Shepherd lay quietly in the corner, his watchful eyes never leaving Emily and Ethan. "He's getting stronger every day," Sarah commented, noting how Ethan reached for Emily's finger in his sleep. "The bond between you is already visible." The social worker had seen countless cases of family reunification, but something about Emily's situation touched her deeply. Perhaps it was the way the young mother sang soft lullabies to her son, or how she documented every tiny movement and expression in a journal, making up for lost time. Outside the center, Linda Martinez was working tirelessly to build Emily's case for custody. The lawyer had assembled a team of domestic violence experts and child welfare advocates who could testify about the complex circumstances that led to Emily's desperate choice. Public opinion in Springfield remained divided, but a growing number of residents were beginning to understand the nuances of her situation. The morning calm was shattered when Marcus walked into the Social Services Center, presenting himself as Ethan's biological father. He carried a folder full of seemingly legitimate documents, birth records, photographs, and affidavits that appeared to support his claim. His appearance was polished, his manner professional, and his story carefully crafted to paint himself as a concerned father searching for his child. "I've been looking for them for months," he explained to the center's director, his voice carrying just the right note of concern. "When I saw the news about my son, I knew I had to come forward." The news of Marcus's arrival spread through Springfield like wildfire. Rachel Simmons was already preparing a follow-up story, eager to add another layer to the unfolding drama. But John Miller, who had been watching the Social Services Center from his shop across the street, noticed something that others missed: Buddy's reaction to the newcomer. The usually calm German Shepherd had become visibly agitated the moment Marcus entered the building. His behavior reminded John of that fateful day by the railroad tracks when Buddy's instincts had led them to baby Ethan. There was something about Marcus that the dog clearly didn't trust. Inside the center, Emily's world tilted on its axis when she learned of Marcus's presence. The sight of him through the office window brought back a flood of memories she had fought hard to suppress. Her hands began to shake, and her voice trembled as she spoke to Linda. "He's not here for Ethan," she whispered urgently. "He's here to regain control. Those documents, they can't be real." Linda immediately began making calls, working to verify Marcus's claims while ensuring Emily's safety. Sarah Thompson, sensing the tension, moved Ethan to a secure area of the facility. Buddy, who had managed to position himself between Emily and the direction of Marcus's voice, stood alert and protective. The community's reaction to Marcus's appearance was mixed. Some saw him as a rightful father claiming his child, while others, particularly those who had witnessed Emily's genuine love for Ethan, remained skeptical. John Miller, trusting Buddy's instincts, began his own quiet investigation into Marcus's past. Rachel Simmons, sensing there was more to the story than Marcus was telling, found herself at a crossroads. Her initial breaking news about Emily had caused unforeseen consequences, and now she faced a decision: continue pursuing ratings at any cost, or dig deeper for the truth that lay beneath the surface. As the day progressed, Marcus made his presence increasingly felt in Springfield. He booked a room at the local hotel, spoke cordially with townspeople, and began building his case for custody. His charm and well-practiced stories began to sway some opinions in his favor. But those who looked closer, like John and Linda, noticed the subtle signs of manipulation in his behavior. Emily, meanwhile, fought to maintain her composure during her supervised visits with Ethan. Each precious moment with her son was now shadowed by the fear that Marcus would find a way to take him away. The weight of her past decisions pressed heavily upon her, but she knew she couldn't run again, not this time. Springfield had become more than just her hometown. It was now the battleground where she would make her final stand for her son's future. The sun set on a town holding its collective breath, waiting to see how this new chapter would unfold. In the gathering darkness, Buddy maintained his vigilant patrol between the Social Services Center and John's auto shop, as if he alone understood the true nature of the threat that had arrived in Springfield. The dog's unwavering dedication would soon prove to be more crucial than anyone could have imagined. The night settled over Springfield like a heavy blanket, bringing with it an unusual tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the small town. Emily had taken temporary refuge in a small apartment above John's auto shop, the only place she felt safe from both the media's prying eyes and Marcus's intimidating presence. The evening was quiet, save for the distant sound of trains and Buddy's occasional alert barks from his post by the window. Linda Martinez had spent the entire day examining Marcus's documentation, something about them niggling at her experienced legal mind. The papers looked legitimate at first glance, but there were subtle inconsistencies that raised red flags. She had begun making calls to colleagues in other states, trying to verify the authenticity of various signatures and stamps. Something's not adding up, Linda had told Emily earlier that evening. The dates on some of these documents don't align with the timelines. We just need a little more time to prove it. Her words were meant to be reassuring, but the worry in her voice was unmistakable. Sarah Thompson had instituted additional security measures at the Social Services Center, ensuring that no one, not even Marcus, could access Ethan without proper authorization and supervision. The baby had become the eye of a storm that was growing more intense by the hour. As midnight approached, Buddy's behavior suddenly changed. His ears perked up, and his usual calm demeanor shifted to high alert. He began pacing between the window and the door of Emily's apartment, his agitation growing with each passing minute. Emily, who had been trying to sleep, noticed the change immediately. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, moving to the window. The street below was dark and seemingly empty, but Buddy's increasing anxiety suggested otherwise. Years of running had taught Emily to trust such warnings, and every instinct told her something was wrong. She reached for her phone to call John, who lived just a few blocks away. But before she could dial, Buddy's barking became more urgent and insistent. The sound echoed through the quiet night, reminiscent of his behavior the day he had found Ethan by the railroad tracks. John, who had been unable to sleep due to his own concerns about the situation, heard Buddy's barks from his home. He knew instantly that this wasn't normal behavior for the German Shepherd. Without hesitation, he grabbed his keys and headed for the auto shop. Meanwhile, at the Social Services Center, a security guard was making his routine checks when he noticed movement in the shadows near the back entrance. The center's security system had been updated recently, but someone familiar with older building plans might know about the service entrance that was rarely used. Buddy's barking reached a fever pitch, and Emily's heart nearly stopped when she saw a dark figure moving swiftly across the street toward the Social Services Center. Even in the dim light, she recognized Marcus's distinctive gait. Fighting back panic, she dialed 911 while simultaneously sending a text to both Linda and Sarah. The German Shepherd was already halfway down the external stairs of the apartment, his powerful form moving with purpose through the darkness. Emily followed, her fear for Ethan overriding any concern for her own safety. As she reached the street, she saw John's truck approaching from the other direction, his headlights illuminating the scene. Inside the social services center, the security guard had just discovered that the backup power system had been tampered with, potentially compromising the building's electronic locks. He was reaching for his radio when Buddy's barking drew his attention to the service entrance. Marcus had nearly reached the door when the German Shepherd intercepted him, positioning himself between the man and the entrance. The dog's usually friendly demeanor was replaced by a protective stance that left no doubt about his intentions. His barking had changed to a low, warning growl that seemed to resonate through the quiet night. John arrived at the scene just as police sirens became audible in the distance. The security guard, alerted by Buddy's barking, had already activated the center's emergency protocols. Sarah Thompson, who lived nearby, was also rushing to the scene, having received Emily's text. The confrontation that followed would be talked about in Springfield for years to come. Marcus, caught between the approaching police and Buddy's unwavering guard, revealed his true nature. His carefully constructed facade cracked, showing the desperation and anger that Emily had fled from years ago. "You don't understand," he shouted at the gathering crowd of concerned citizens who had been awakened by the commotion. "That's my son in there. I have the right to take him." But Buddy stood firm, his presence a physical manifestation of the protection that Springfield had wrapped around Emily and Ethan. The German Shepherd, who had once been a wandering stray adopted by the entire town, had become a symbol of the community's unity in the face of threat and injustice. The morning after the attempted break-in at the Social Services Center, Springfield buzzed with tension and anticipation. The police had taken Marcus into custody, and his documents were now under intense scrutiny. Linda Martinez sat in her office, surrounded by papers and computer screens, working with a team of forensic document experts who had arrived early that morning. Rachel Simmons paced in her temporary newsroom, wrestling with a crisis of conscience. Her pursuit of ratings had inadvertently led to this situation, putting a child at risk. The ambitious reporter who had been so quick to expose Emily's identity now found herself questioning everything about how she had handled the story. "I need to make this right," she muttered to herself, staring at the wall of news clippings she had assembled about the case. Her eyes lingered on the first story she had written about Buddy finding the baby. Something about Marcus's documentation had been bothering her since he appeared, and now she understood why. At the police station, the investigation into Marcus's documents was revealing troubling inconsistencies. The timestamps on certain papers didn't align with official records, and some of the signatures showed signs of digital manipulation. Linda Martinez had been right. Something wasn't adding up. John Miller spent the morning at his auto shop, keeping a protective eye on Emily's apartment above, while Buddy maintained his vigilant patrol of the property. The German Shepherd had barely rested since the previous night's events, as if he sensed that his job as protector wasn't finished yet. Emily sat in Linda's office, her hands steady as she provided detailed information about her past with Marcus. "He always knew how to manipulate documents," she explained. "It was part of what made him so dangerous. He could make everything look legitimate on paper." As the morning progressed, Rachel made a decision that would change everything. She walked into the police station, carrying a folder of her own research. In her desperate hunt for Emily's identity, she had accumulated a substantial amount of background information, including details about Marcus that she hadn't initially deemed newsworthy. "I have something you need to see," she told the detective in charge. "I was so focused on breaking the story about Emily that I didn't look closely enough at these patterns." She spread out a timeline she had created, showing Marcus's movements across several states, each coinciding with reports of document fraud and identity theft. Sarah Thompson arrived at Linda's office with new information from her own investigation. The social services networks in 3 different states had reported similar cases. A man matching Marcus's description had attempted to claim parental rights using falsified documents. Each time, he had disappeared before the authorities could investigate fully. The evidence was mounting, but it was a call from a small courthouse in another state that finally broke the case wide open. A clerk there recognized Marcus's name from an ongoing investigation into a ring of document forgers. The papers he had presented in Springfield were part of a larger pattern of fraudulent activities. Buddy, who had been restless all morning, suddenly perked up as Linda's car pulled into the auto shop's parking lot. The lawyer's expression was triumphant as she hurried inside with a stack of papers. "We've got him," she announced to Emily and John. "The documents are definitely forged. The forensics team found digital watermarks that prove they were created recently, long after the dates they claim to represent." Rachel Simmons watched from across the street as the scene unfolded. The reporter who had once seen this only as a story about an abandoned baby and a heroic dog now understood the deeper narrative about justice, redemption, and the power of community. She knew what she had to do. That evening, Rachel sat in front of the camera, preparing to go live with a very different kind of story. Gone was the sensationalism that had characterized her earlier reports. Instead, she had prepared a thoughtful, in-depth piece that would reveal the truth about Marcus's deception and, more importantly, acknowledge her own role in putting Emily and Ethan at risk. "Good evening, Springfield," she began, her voice carrying a new weight of responsibility. "Tonight, I have a story to tell you. Not just about a mother and her child, or about a remarkable dog named Buddy, but about our responsibility as journalists and as a community to seek the truth, even when it means admitting our own mistakes." The broadcast that followed would become a turning point in how Springfield viewed Emily's story. Rachel methodically laid out the evidence of Marcus's deceptions, explained how his fraudulent documents had been created, and most importantly, gave context to Emily's original decision to leave her baby, where he would be found quickly and safely. As the truth about Marcus's deception spread through Springfield, the community's perspective began to shift. The same social media channels that had once condemned Emily now filled with messages of support and understanding. The town that had been divided by judgment was being reunited by compassion and truth. Just as the dust began to settle from Marcus's exposed deception, a new challenge emerged that would test Emily's resolve once again. The State Child Welfare Organization had taken notice of the case, and their arrival in Springfield brought a fresh wave of scrutiny to Emily's situation. Patricia Reynolds, the organization's senior investigator, arrived with a thick folder and a reputation for being thorough to a fault. "Our primary concern is the child's well-being," Patricia stated firmly during her first meeting with Sarah Thompson at the Social Services Center. The mother's initial abandonment, regardless of the circumstances, raises serious concerns about her capacity for long-term care. The news hit Emily like a physical blow. She sat in Linda Martinez's office, clutching a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, as her lawyer explained the implications. "They're going to investigate everything," Linda explained gently. "Your current living situation, your employment history, your support system, everything." Buddy, who had somehow sensed the meeting's importance, had positioned himself at Emily's feet, his steady presence offering silent support. The German Shepherd had become such a constant in her life that even Patricia Reynolds had remarked on the unusual bond between the dog, Emily, and Ethan during their supervised visits. John Miller, watching the situation unfold, decided to take action. He called a meeting at the local community center, inviting key members of the Springfield community who had witnessed Emily's dedication to rebuilding her life. "She needs us now more than ever," he told the gathered crowd. "We've seen who she really is. We've watched her fight for her son. We can't let bureaucracy tear them apart." Rachel Simmons, still working to right her earlier wrongs, began researching similar cases where mothers had successfully regained custody after difficult circumstances. Her investigation revealed a pattern. Community support and a stable environment were often crucial factors in positive outcomes. "Emily needs to demonstrate that she has a support system here," Rachel explained to John and Linda. "The organization needs to see that she's not alone in this." The challenge before them was significant. Emily needed to find permanent housing, secure, stable employment, and prove she could provide a safe and nurturing environment for Ethan. The apartment above John's auto shop, while safe, was considered temporary by the organization's standards. Sarah Thompson, who had been working closely with Emily throughout the ordeal, stepped forward with a solution. "The Wilson House on Maple Street is available," she announced during a strategy meeting. "Mrs. Wilson is moving to assisted living, and she's willing to rent it to Emily at a reduced rate. It's right across from the park, walking distance to downtown." The community's response was immediate and heartwarming. Local business owners offered Emily job interviews, understanding her need for flexible hours to care for Ethan. The ladies from the church group organized a furniture drive for the Wilson House. Even the local daycare center offered to hold a spot for Ethan once Emily was granted custody. Patricia Reynolds observed all of this with professional detachment, making detailed notes in her ever-present folder. She watched Emily's interactions with Ethan during visits, noted how the baby's face lit up at his mother's arrival, and couldn't help but be impressed by Buddy's protective yet gentle behavior around the child. "It's unusual," Patricia admitted to Sarah during one of their meetings. "The level of community involvement in this case is something I haven't seen before. But we have to follow protocol. Good intentions aren't enough. We need to see concrete evidence of stability." Emily threw herself into meeting every requirement the organization set forth. She attended parenting classes, found a job at the local library that offered both stability and flexibility, and worked with Linda to document every step of her progress. The Wilson House slowly transformed into a home, with a nursery painted in soft greens and yellows, child safety features installed by John and his friends, and even a special corner for Buddy's bed. The German Shepherd, ever vigilant, had taken to accompanying Emily to work, waiting patiently outside the library and walking her home each evening. His constant presence became a symbol of the unconditional support Emily had found in Springfield, a living testament to the bonds of loyalty and trust that had formed in the wake of adversity. Rachel Simmons, watching the community rally around Emily, realized she had stumbled upon a story far more meaningful than her original sensational exposé. She began working on a documentary about the transformation of both Emily and the town itself, focusing on how crisis had fostered resilience and unity. But Patricia Reynolds remained a concern. Despite the positive changes, she continued to raise questions about the long-term implications of Emily's past decisions. The organization's primary mandate is to prevent any possibility of future abandonment, she explained during one particularly tense meeting. "We need absolute certainty." The pressure of constant evaluation began to weigh heavily on Emily. Each supervised visit, while precious, carried the strain of being observed and judged. Every decision, every interaction with Ethan was scrutinized and documented. The joy of motherhood was filtered through a lens of institutional assessment, turning natural moments into items on a checklist. Rachel Simmons sat in her producer's office at the regional news station, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The story she was about to tell would not only impact Emily's life, but could potentially affect her own career. Yet, as she thought about the young mother's struggle and the community's transformation, She knew it was time to set the record straight. "I want to do a live special broadcast," Rachel explained to her producer. "There are things about this story, about how I reported it, that need to be addressed." The producer leaned back in his chair, skeptical of the ratings potential of a correction piece, but Rachel's determination was unwavering. That evening, as the cameras rolled, Rachel looked directly into the lens and began her confession. "Good evening. Tonight, I need to speak about truth, responsibility, and the power of second chances. When I first broke the story about Emily Carter and her baby, I made choices as a reporter that prioritized sensationalism over humanity." The broadcast continued as Rachel methodically outlined how she had shaped the narrative to create drama, occasionally sacrificing context for impact. She explained how her rush to expose Emily's identity had put both mother and child at risk, indirectly enabling Marcus's attempted intervention. In Springfield, people gathered around their television sets, watching as the journalist who had inflamed their judgments now worked to extinguish them. At the library, where Emily was finishing her evening shift, patrons and staff alike fell silent as Rachel's voice filled the room. "The truth about Emily Carter isn't in the headlines I wrote," Rachel continued. "It's in the quiet moments I've witnessed since then. It's in the way she reads to her son during supervised visits, how she's rebuilt her life despite constant scrutiny, and how this community has shown what it means to offer genuine support to someone in need." Buddy, who had been waiting outside the library for Emily as usual, perked up his ears at the sound of approaching footsteps. Several community members had begun to gather, drawn by a shared purpose. Among them was Patricia Reynolds, the child welfare organization investigator who had been watching Rachel's broadcast from her hotel room. As Emily emerged from the library, she found herself surrounded by supportive faces. Sarah Thompson stepped forward, holding a tablet showing Rachel's live broadcast. "You need to see this," she said gently, as the group gathered closer. Rachel's voice continued to fill the evening air. "I've spent weeks documenting this story, and what I've discovered is something remarkable. Springfield hasn't just offered Emily Carter a second chance. She has given this town an opportunity to demonstrate the true meaning of community." The camera panned to show footage of the Wilson house being prepared for Emily and Ethan, of library patrons warmly greeting their new employee, of Buddy maintaining his faithful vigil. These quiet moments of support and acceptance painted a picture far different from the sensational headlines that had first brought attention to Springfield. Patricia Reynolds watched the scene unfolding outside the library with professional interest. She had seen many communities pay lip service to supporting families in crisis, but this was different. The genuine nature of Springfield's embrace of Emily was evident in countless small gestures and consistent actions. John Miller arrived in his truck, having closed the auto shop early to watch the broadcast. He joined the growing crowd, standing beside Emily as Rachel continued her public reconciliation with the truth. The mechanic's quiet support had never wavered, from the day Buddy led him to baby Ethan to this moment of community vindication. "As journalists, we have a responsibility to tell the truth." Rachel's voice cracked slightly. "But sometimes, in our rush to break news, we forget that truth has many layers." Emily Carter's story isn't just about a mother who left her baby by the railroad tracks. It's about courage, redemption, and the power of a community to heal old wounds. The broadcast concluded with Rachel introducing a new series that would focus on families overcoming adversity through community support. She announced that the first episode would feature Springfield, not as a town divided by controversy, but as an example of how judgment can transform into understanding. As the crowd outside the library began to disperse, Patricia Reynolds approached Emily. The investigator's typically stern expression had softened. "Ms. Carter," she began, "I believe it's time we reviewed your case from a fresh perspective." Buddy, who had maintained his protective stance near Emily throughout the gathering, gently wagged his tail. The German Shepherd's instincts about people had proven unerring throughout this journey, and his relaxed demeanor around Patricia seemed to signal yet another positive turn in Emily's story. The evening ended with Emily walking home to the Wilson house, accompanied by John, Sarah, and several other community members. The sunset painted Springfield in warm hues, and for the first time since her return, Emily felt the full weight of judgment lifting from her shoulders. Rachel's truth-telling had done more than clear the air. It had given the entire town permission to embrace a more compassionate perspective. The morning sun rose over Springfield to find the town in an unusual state of worry. Buddy, the German Shepherd who had become the heart of their community, had mysteriously vanished. The dog's absence was first noticed when he failed to appear for his usual morning watch outside the social services center where Ethan was staying. Emily's heart sank when she arrived for her morning visit with Ethan and found no sign of the faithful dog who had become such an integral part of their daily routine. John Miller, who had grown accustomed to seeing Buddy patrol between his auto shop and the center, immediately sensed something was wrong. "He's never just disappeared before," John explained to Sarah Thompson, who had arrived early to prepare for Emily's visit. "Even when he used to wander the town, he always had a pattern, a purpose." The concern in his voice reflected the deeper worry shared by everyone who knew Buddy's dedicated nature. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. The same people who had rallied around Emily now mobilized to search for the dog who had started it all. Local businesses posted missing dog flyers in their windows, while volunteers organized search parties to comb through every street and alley in Springfield. Patricia Reynolds, who had been preparing her final report on Emily's case, found herself drawn into the search efforts. She had witnessed firsthand the unique bond between Buddy, Emily, and Ethan during their supervised visits. "The dog's presence has been a stabilizing factor in this case," she noted to Sarah. "His protective instincts and gentle nature with the baby have been remarkable." Rachel Simmons, seeking to use her platform for good this time, broadcast regular updates about the search efforts. Her coverage highlighted how the community had come together once again, demonstrating the strong bonds that had formed through adversity. "Buddy isn't just Emily's protector," Rachel reported. "He's become a symbol of hope for our entire town." As the day progressed, search parties expanded their radius, checking parks, abandoned buildings, and even the railroad tracks where Buddy had first found Ethan. Emily split her time between visiting her son and joining the search efforts, her worry growing with each passing hour. The German Shepherd had been her steadfast guardian since her return to Springfield, and his absence left her feeling oddly vulnerable. John's auto shop became the unofficial headquarters for the search operation. Maps of Springfield covered his workbench, marked with areas already searched and places yet to be explored. The community's response touched Emily deeply. People who had once judged her harshly were now working tirelessly to find the dog who had brought her story to light. Linda Martinez, taking a break from preparing Emily's custody case, joined the search efforts in the afternoon. "Buddy's presence in your life has been a powerful testament to your support system," she had told Emily earlier. "He's proof that you're not alone in this journey." As evening approached, the worry in Springfield grew more palpable. Buddy had never disappeared for this long before. The search parties now carried flashlights, determined to continue their efforts into the night. The local pizza shop provided free meals to the volunteers, while the coffee shop stayed open late, offering hot drinks to cold and tired searchers. Sarah Thompson, observing the community's response, made detailed notes for her social services report. The town's unified effort to find Buddy demonstrated exactly the kind of support system that Emily would need as a single mother. Even Patricia Reynolds seemed impressed by the spontaneous organization and dedication of the search parties. Just when spirits were beginning to flag, a call came in from Mrs. Wilson, Emily's elderly landlady. She had heard barking coming from an old storage shed behind her property, a place no one had thought to check because it had been locked and unused for years. John and Emily rushed to the scene, followed by a group of concerned volunteers. The sight that greeted them would be remembered in Springfield for years to come. Buddy was indeed in the shed, but he wasn't alone. He had somehow managed to find his way inside through a broken board and had been keeping watch over a litter of abandoned kittens. The maternal instinct that had led him to protect Ethan had now extended to these tiny, vulnerable creatures. The discovery brought tears to Emily's eyes. Even in his disappearance, Buddy had demonstrated the same protective instincts that had first brought her son to safety. The German shepherd looked up at the gathered crowd with what almost seemed like embarrassment, as if apologizing for causing such worry while he attended to his self-appointed rescue mission. Patricia Reynolds, who had arrived at the scene with her ever-present notebook, watched as Emily knelt beside Buddy, checking him for any injuries while he continued to guard his tiny charges. The investigator's pen moved quickly across the page, documenting this latest demonstration of the unique bond between the dog and the young mother, who understood all too well the desire to protect the vulnerable. The discovery of Buddy with the abandoned kittens became a turning point in Springfield's perception of Emily's story. The parallel between the German shepherd's protective instincts and Emily's difficult choice resonated deeply within the community. The local animal shelter had taken in the kittens, but not before photographs of Buddy's vigilant care had spread throughout the town, touching hearts and changing minds. Patricia Reynolds sat in her office at the Child Welfare Organization, reviewing her final assessment of Emily's case. The investigators' initial skepticism had gradually transformed into cautious optimism as she witnessed the extraordinary support system that had developed around Emily and Ethan. Her report now filled several folders, documenting not just Emily's progress, but the remarkable way Springfield had embraced them both. "In my 20 years of child welfare work," Patricia wrote in her conclusion, "I have rarely seen such a comprehensive demonstration of community support. The subject has not only established stability in her life, but has inspired an entire town to examine its capacity for understanding and forgiveness." Sarah Thompson arrived at the Wilson house early that morning to find Emily already awake, preparing for another day at the library. The house, once just a rental property, had become a true home. Children's books filled the shelves, carefully selected by Emily during her work hours. Buddy's bed occupied a corner of the living room, though the German shepherd spent most of his time wherever Ethan was. "The final hearing is tomorrow," Sarah reminded Emily gently, "but after everything we've documented, I'm feeling very positive." The social worker's optimism was well-founded. The evidence of Emily's transformation was everywhere, from her steady job to her growing network of support, from the stable home she had created to the unwavering dedication she showed during every visit with Ethan. John Miller closed his auto shop early that day, gathering with other community members at the local diner. They had been planning something special for Emily, regardless of the hearing's outcome. The town that had once been divided by her story was now united in their support for her future. "She's shown us what real courage looks like," John told the gathered group. "Not just in coming back to face her past, but in fighting every day to make things right." The others nodded in agreement, each contributing ideas for how to make their support tangible and lasting. Rachel Simmons, who had been documenting Springfield's journey alongside Emily's, sat in her editing room, reviewing footage for her final piece. The story that had begun as a sensational exposé had evolved into something far more meaningful, a chronicle of redemption, community, and second chances. Linda Martinez worked late into the evening, ensuring every detail was perfect for the next day's hearing. The lawyer had compiled testimonies from dozens of Springfield residents, each attesting to Emily's character and dedication. But perhaps the most powerful evidence was the simple daily log of Emily's visits with Ethan, showing the natural and growing bond between mother and son. Buddy, who had become even more protective since his adventure with the kittens, divided his time between guarding the social services center and accompanying Emily on her daily routines. His presence had become so normal that even Patricia Reynolds mentioned him in her official reports, noting the unique role he played in creating a stable environment for both mother and child. As evening fell over Springfield, Emily sat on the porch of the Wilson house, Buddy at her feet, looking at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars had witnessed her desperate flight years ago, her painful choice by the railroad tracks, and now her journey toward redemption. The town around her had fallen quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, full of hope and possibility. Tomorrow would bring the final hearing, the culmination of months of effort and transformation. The evidence was overwhelming. Emily had not only created a stable home and secure income, but had also built something many considered even more important, a community of support that would ensure she and Ethan would never have to face their challenges alone. Patricia Reynolds made one final visit to the Wilson house that evening. She found Emily preparing Ethan's room, folding tiny clothes and arranging stuffed animals with careful attention. Buddy watched from the doorway, his vigilant presence a constant reminder of how this story began. "Ms. Carter," Patricia began, her professional demeanor softening slightly, "I want you to know that regardless of tomorrow's outcome, what you've achieved here is remarkable. You've not only transformed your own life, but helped transform an entire community's understanding of what it means to support one another." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily looked around the room she had prepared with such hope and care, then at Buddy, who had remained by her side through every challenge. Tomorrow would bring its own answer, but for now, she allowed herself to feel the strength of the foundation she had built, not just the physical home around her, but the broader home she had found in Springfield's embrace. The morning sun painted Springfield in shades of gold as Emily Carter stepped onto her porch at the Wilson house, Ethan secure in her arms and Buddy faithfully at her side. The past months had transformed not only her life, but the entire community's understanding of love, forgiveness, and second chances. The custody hearing had concluded with a unanimous decision in Emily's favor. Patricia Reynolds' final report had been instrumental, documenting not just Emily's personal growth, but the extraordinary support system that had developed around her and Ethan. The Child Welfare Organization had been particularly impressed by the way Springfield had rallied to create a stable, nurturing environment for the young family. Sarah Thompson, who had watched the journey unfold from its beginning, often stopped by to find Emily reading to Ethan in their cozy living room, Buddy curled up nearby. The German Shepherd had seamlessly transitioned from town guardian to family protector, his gentle nature with Ethan drawing smiles from everyone who witnessed their interactions. The library had become more than just Emily's workplace. It was where she built her future, one story at a time. She had started a reading program for young mothers, sharing her love of books while creating a support network for others facing similar challenges. The community's response had been overwhelmingly positive, with the program quickly becoming a cornerstone of Springfield's family services. John Miller's auto shop remained a constant in their lives, its doors always open for Emily and Ethan. The mechanic had become like family, his quiet strength and unwavering support helping to heal old wounds. He had even installed a small play area in the shop's waiting room, where Ethan could safely explore while Buddy kept watch. Rachel Simmons's documentary about Springfield's transformation had aired nationally, touching hearts far beyond the small Illinois town. The story of a community coming together to support a mother and child, guided by the unwavering loyalty of a remarkable dog, had resonated with audiences across the country. Messages of support and similar stories of redemption poured in from viewers everywhere. One particularly bright afternoon, as Emily walked home from the library with Ethan in his stroller and Buddy by their side, she paused to watch a train passing on the nearby tracks. The sound that had once carried such weight of memory now seemed different, a reminder not of loss and desperate choices, but of the journey that had brought them home. Linda Martinez, who had fought so hard for Emily's rights, often referenced the case when speaking to law students about the importance of looking beyond surface judgments. The true measure of justice, she would say, lies in our ability to understand the complex circumstances that shape human choices. The Wilson house had blossomed under Emily's care. The garden she and Ethan tended together drew admiring glances from passers-by, while Buddy's well-worn path around the property spoke of his continued vigilance. The home had become a symbol of what was possible when a community chose understanding over judgment, support over condemnation. Springfield itself had changed. The town that had once been divided by Emily's story now stood united in its commitment to supporting families in crisis. The railroad tracks where Buddy had found Ethan now bordered a small park, created by the community as a place of hope and new beginnings. Children played there under the watchful eyes of parents and neighbors, while Buddy often sat nearby, ever the guardian. As Emily watched Ethan grow, each milestone was celebrated not just by her, but by the entire community that had become their extended family. The baby who had once been found by the tracks was now a thriving toddler, his laughter a reminder of the joy that could emerge from even the darkest moments. The story of Springfield, Buddy, and the Carter family didn't end with custody hearings or legal documents. It continued to unfold in daily acts of kindness, in the strong bonds of community, and in the understanding that every person deserves the chance to rewrite their story. As the sun set on another day in Springfield, Emily sat on her porch swing, Ethan sleeping peacefully in her arms and Buddy at her feet. The evening air carried the whispered promise of tomorrow, of more stories waiting to be told, more lives waiting to be touched by the power of compassion and understanding. Dear viewers, we hope that Springfield's story of transformation has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. This journey of hope, redemption, and community spirit reminds us that every person deserves a second chance, and that true strength often comes from standing together. If you've been moved by Emily, Ethan, and Buddy's story, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of human resilience and community support. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we can create more communities where understanding triumphs over judgment and where hope finds a home. Join us tomorrow for another extraordinary story of courage and redemption.